I often hear people use a very precise speed in running, for example, or wattage in cycling to explain where VO2 max happens. So in this video, I want to talk about why that's a problem, why VO2 max doesn't necessarily mean a very precise or unique speed or intensity or wattage, more broadly a given training intensity, and then what we can consider otherwise to find this VO2 max, and then finally how we can train that VO2 max. So let's take it from the top. VO2 max is the maximal amount of oxygen that your body can consume on a continuous effort and or cyclical effort. And typically this is measured with different types of exercise tests. You have continuous ramp tests where you're going to start at a given speed or intensity. Let's take a bike, for example. You might start at 80 or 100 watts, and you're going to increase the power on the bike every 1, 2, or 3 minutes, depends on the protocol. And then at some point, you're going to reach what we call VO2 max, and this is typically measured with a metabolic analyzer, those blue masks with the devices that go on them. And essentially it's going to be the maximum amount of oxygen your body can consume at a given point in time, and typically at the end of that exercise test. And the way that's typically determined, if we take it just in the simplest way possible, you're going to have about 21% of oxygen in the ambient air, and when you exhale after you've consumed some of that oxygen, you might exhale maybe 17%. And it's going to vary depending on the person and different parameters. And then if you take that delta between 21 and 17 and you multiply that by the amount of air, total air that you moved in the minute, and there's a few adjustments, but a few technicalities I'll refrain from going into in this video, considerations of humidity of the air inside the body, outside the body, etc. But essentially the math does its thing, and now we end up with a number which is the VO2 max. And oftentimes when people talk about a specific speed in running or a specific wattage in cycling that is going to elicit VO2 max, well, it's typically going to be the end speed or end intensity of the ramp test. But there's a problem there. It's because first of all, that last speed or last wattage that you hit in that step test when you're measuring your VO2 max or looking for your VO2 max is going to be highly dependent on the protocol that you use. Meaning that if you go from 1 minute increments to 2 minute increments or 3 minute increments on each wattage or speed, or if you change the amount of power that you add between each step of the test, that is going to influence what speed or what wattage will be associated with you finding your VO2 max on that test. So to give you a concrete example, if I do a step test or ramp test with 3 minute stages, I'm going to reach my VO2 max at a lower speed or a lower power than if I do a ramp test with 1 minute stages. So essentially the 1 minute stages will allow me to go farther into the test and reach my VO2 max at a higher absolute power or speed. And so we have to essentially get away from just associating a VO2 max with a power or a speed and understand that VO2 max is a state that we're going to reach almost regardless of the actual intensity, as long as we're in this kind of twilight zone of what we call high intensity, or more specifically, or the term you'll find in the research on physiology and exercise testing, it's going to be the severe domain. The severe domain is one of 4 exercise intensity domains. There's the moderate domain, which is low intensity. There's the heavy domain, which is medium intensity, typically between threshold 1 and threshold 2. And then there's the severe domain, which is above threshold 2. And then there's the extreme domain, which lies between about 2 minutes of maximal effort and the maximum power or speed you can reach over a second or two, or the very high end of your maximal expression of intensity, whether it's in running or in cycling. And so the severe domain is typically going to be between the second threshold and about 2 minutes of maximal effort. And pretty much regardless of where you land in that range, if you stay long enough, you will reach your VO2 max. Let me give you a very concrete example. I'll take a highly mediocre cyclist, which is myself, and my second threshold, which I measured a couple weeks ago on a step test, is about 230 watts. Plus I'm heavy too, so it's really not a great result. But anyway, it's gonna help us with this video. 230 watts is my second threshold. If I were to start cycling at a constant power output of say 260, so 30 watts above my second threshold, it's gonna take me a while before I start fatiguing and before I reach my VO2 max, but I'm still gonna reach it, right? Now, if I go and I start cycling at a constant power of 300 watts or 320 watts, it's only going to take me a handful of minutes until I reach my VO2 max and until I have to slow down or stop, right? But neither of those powers are exactly where I reach my VO2 max on a step test. They're simply in the severe domain, and as soon as you go above your second threshold, you are going to trend towards or drift towards your VO2 max. Or more specifically, if we want to be more correct in terminology, we would say VO2 peak, because VO2 max is almost like a proprietary term that you're going to reach on a specific type of test, specific type of VRM test with specific end conditions to the test that make it or not when it comes to whether you reached or whether we determine that you reached VO2 max or not. So VO2 peak is kind of the broader term of your maximal oxygen consumption on a given effort, regardless of the format of the session of the test. So it's important to understand that your VO2 max, you're going to reach it in the severe domain pretty much no matter what, as long as you give yourself enough time to get there. Now, to train that VO2 max, you don't need, again, to train at a specific speed or a specific power output, as long as you land in that range. And as long as you spend enough time with different training, or let's say durations when it comes to intervals and rest and work to rest ratios, you are going to get close to VO2 max or even reach it. And then it seems like spending time close to your VO2 max during those high intensity sessions is one of the determinants of how much your VO2 max is going to improve. But it's also important to understand that VO2 max sessions or high intensity sessions are not the only type of training you can do to improve your maximal oxygen consumption. It does seem like every training intensity will have some positive effect on your VO2 max. Obviously, it's going to depend on your level, it's going to depend on your current training, and all those things will determine what type of intervals or what type of sessions you should do if you want to get the best results when it comes to improving your VO2 max. And also, one thing that came out recently in the research is that even though certain research papers show that this interval type or that interval type or that way of breaking up work and rest ratios has the best effect on VO2 max in a given session or over a certain duration of the study, Steven Seiler, one of the most important researchers in endurance exercise, I would say, recently published a paper showing or explaining the idea that there is no magic pill, there is no magic training session, and if you want to have the best results, you need to consistently train, and you need to also consistently challenge yourself with difficult sessions. Those might be medium intensity at certain times of the year, high intensity at certain times of the year, very high intensity at certain times of the year, or a mix of all three types of intensities over time. But you also need a good base of low intensity, and you need, first and foremost, consistency. And it's that consistency over time that will yield the best results when it comes to improving your VO2 max, not just doing Norwegian 4x4s and zone 2 all the time, all year, and for the rest of your life. So we need to think about this idea that the best training is the one you've never done. The best stimulus is the one you've never had. So we have a wide range of possibilities when it comes to the type of trainings we should put in place if we want to improve. I hope you enjoyed that video. I enjoyed recording it. It's been a while since I used this walk and talk format. but I quite like it and the weather's beautiful. Let me know in the comments if you'd like more of those type of short snippet videos, and also what topics you would like me to cover. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.